I'm gonna call this the discount pool, and she won't like that because she wants me to talk about financial aid, but the fact is, you know, day schools are tuition-driven places, most of them, and they all provide financial aid in the form of what I'm gonna call discounts, and the reason I'm gonna call them that is this school sits on a tiny endowment. So if we had a big endowment that was chunking off dollars for financial aid or whatever else, then that would be revenue to the school. And so somebody who's on full need and somebody who gets a full tuition benefit is the same to the school, revenue on both sides. That's not how it works in smaller, newer schools. And so this school essentially provides about $1 million plus in financial aid, which is really discounts, out of a budget of $8 million or so. And that's a very high percentage, actually. And that's been increased since the recession, so the school's stretched to try to create more affordability, but it is not, as Sarah says, it's not an access-based program. It's to try to make the school more affordable, but almost everybody's got a big chunk of skin in the game. The average award is 35%. So if you're getting an award, you're still writing a large check, typically. And that's true of almost every newish day school in the country. So the places that aren't like that would be Kamehameha School in Honolulu, which has billions of dollars in endowment. Milton Hershey School, Hershey Fortune. Roxbury Latin School, which is entering its 403rd year, I think. It was founded before Harvard, and I think, or right in there. Lick Wilmerding, another one in San Francisco. Those are anomalies and outliers. Most places are like Wakefield, chugging along, doing everything they can, but still a tough stretch for everybody to send their kids. And we're really discounting right at the margins, that is, in terms of making the school work. It's an expensive program. Just is lots of people, certainly at the upper ends. You've got relatively small classes in the terminating courses like BC Calculus and the AP courses. You know, the school could farm those out to computers, but we've got people in front of everybody, and anybody can take a full academic program here without having to go somewhere else. So that's been a program commitment here. And almost all strong, independent school, academically driven schools use need as a component, almost all. I've never been in a school in 43 years that didn't have a need-based program.
So what I thought I would do is just walk you through the mechanics of how to apply for aid. So to do that, you're going to want to go, whoops, sorry, wrong thing. So you want to go from the homepage of the website to admission and down to affording Wakefield. And here is all of the information you need about applying for aid. So those of you who completed the financial aid application previously will remember that it's online. We use a company called FAST, which is the Financial Aid for School Tuition program that helps just collect the data for the financial aid application. So you'll sit down with your tax return, either 2012, and then you're going to have to estimate, because your application is done for the 14-15 school year based on your 2013 taxes, which I know you haven't probably done yet, and that's okay. You can sit down with your 2012 return and estimate based off of that, because the biggest variable for most of us usually is income, and that's the one that obviously will swing your financial aid award significantly in any direction or the other. The other thing that can have a relatively significant impact on your award based off of your tax returns is if you happen to liquidate stocks or IRA accounts or something like that, and would have bumped up your income. So you just want to make sure if you've done that, you take that into account and fill in. The FAST application is just the starting point of the financial aid application process, as most of you who've worked with us know. The most important thing when you fill out the FAST application is, one, to be accurate. because we do get your taxes, and, we're not looking to find out whether you overestimated or underestimated, but we do have to make sure everything, lines up. So be accurate, don't sort of try to shift the numbers to account for what you think is a more realistic picture of your financial health, but do take advantage of the opportunity to write a detailed personal statement, because that's where we have the ability to look and say, okay, here's what the hard numbers tell us, and that's X, but here's what this family told us about their financial picture that didn't come through on the quantitative part of the form. So it really helps you help us, or helps us help you rather, if you give us as much information as possible in that personal statement. And I can't really tell you what to say in that personal statement because it's going to be different for each one of you. If you feel like the quantitative part of the form really accurately captured your family's financial profile, then great. Maybe you don't need to write one and you can just write, I feel like the form captured our financial profile just fine. But if you feel like there's major information or major pieces of the picture that didn't get captured in the quantitative part of the form, share those. But you have to share numbers. You can't just say, wow, it's been a really tough year for our family, we sure could use more aid. That doesn't really help me help you. But if you say, wow, we had 2 cars that needed brand new transmissions, and one of us had to have surgery and it cost this much, and it cost this much for the car repairs, and in the next year, I know both of our kids are going to need braces and that's going to cost this much. That's not going to be money necessarily off the bottom line, but it helps when we're looking at the overall picture to say, okay, let's just consider how these other pieces fit into the financial aid puzzle. The other piece to keep in mind as you're filling out the application and sort of reviewing your award, as many of you know, sorry, I can't breathe very well. As many of you know, it asks sort of, have you made major home renovations? How much did you spend on vacations? What cars are you driving? That sort of thing. And we're not asking those things to judge you. You can decide what kind of car to drive and how expensive of a house to live in and how much to spend on clothes. That's all totally up to you. We're not judging you. But when we look at the aid application and families' expenses, we do have to look and say, what's the discretionary pool of income? And those things, so the application is going to allow you a certain amount to spend on reasonable living expenses. So we don't expect you to drive a 1980 Datsun, but we don't expect that financial aid is helping you go out and buy the latest model Lexus every year either. So that's what we're looking for, is to just make sure that in that pot of discretionary money, we're giving you enough to live a reasonable life. So we're setting aside enough that you can live comfortably and adequately in this area, but that we're also not affording, family trips to Europe every vacation and that sort of thing. We don't expect you never to go on vacation. We don't expect you to only eat hot dogs and spaghetti. And FAST does help us in estimating the cost of living expenses in the different geographic areas. And then we also sort of go in and look at those and say, okay, does this seem reasonable? So we can set standards for all of that. So it's really the reason we switched to this program from the program we used. I guess this is our 3rd year with FAST. We switched from SSS because it didn't allow us to be as flexible in setting the sort of protections around that discretionary income in a way that we felt was very reflective of how expensive it was to live in this area. So essentially then, through the application process, we'll decide how much discretionary income you have based on the information you provide. And then through the information you provide and through the cost of living for this area, we'll protect a certain amount of that discretionary income for things like childcare, clothing, vacations, all of that stuff. And then whatever's left is how much you can afford to spend on, according to this process into the school, how much you have to spend on education. And for some of you, that will be nothing, and for some of you, that might be $50,000. And which would obviously mean if you're only paying one tuition, you wouldn't qualify for any aid. If after we had protected some of your discretionary income, you still had $50,000 left, we would expect you to spend whatever your tuition is of that $50,000 on school. So you would get a message back that said, unfortunately, you didn't qualify for aid. So that's basically how the process works. Does anybody have questions about sort of how the numbers go from the quantitative to the final decision? So as you can tell, there is room around protecting that discretionary income, and that's where the personal statement becomes really important. If there's something that we don't know about you that's going to have a big impact on that discretionary income, you need to tell us so that we can figure out how to account for that in your application. And the place you do that is in the personal statement on the application. So that if I don't send you home with any other information, please take the 10 minutes to really thoughtfully do the personal statement, because it's much easier for me to help you if you do that. Yes.
Sarah, I know the deadline is January 12th.
Yes.
Are the applications in queue as to when they arrive, as to how seriously they're considered or how much money can be given?
No. Everybody, as long as you get your application in by January 12th, you'll be in the same pool of consideration. Getting it in December 18th isn't going to give you preference over somebody who gets it in January 12th.
I don't know how many all-nighters there will be.
Yeah. Just any time between now and the 12th would be great. And the reason for that deadline is so that we can process all of these applications and get you awards in your enrollment contract, which will come out over ski week, hopefully. Because we obviously don't want you to be in a position of having an enrollment contract but not knowing if or how much financial aid you would have qualified for. Yes?
What if your application is incomplete and you've got it in on the 12th, but they keep coming back saying you need this, this, or this?
Well, the
Is that
taxes
considered-
are due April 23rd, so most of you will have applications that are incomplete to a certain degree on January 12th, but you have to have filled out your part and submitted it along with the payment by January 12th. We won't expect that you've submitted your taxes by January
But if
12th.
you submit things and then they write back and say,
You have until April 23rd to get all of those the supporting documents submitted.
And the 2012 taxes aren't due to fast?
They were due to fast last April.
That's right.
So if you all can just keep on top of getting those in by mid-April, that would be fantastic. And then what we do is as those come in, at the end of April, we go through and just check to make sure there wasn't, you didn't think that you made $40,000 and really, oh, whoops, we made $100,000. So then you get a phone call from me saying, hey, on your taxes, it looks like your income is pretty askew from what you reported, and congratulations, you're rich. But, so then, or if you thought that maybe you accounted for a year-end bonus that didn't come through, something like that. If there was a big swing, we would call you to make an adjustment. Otherwise, we just verify that it's good and let the business office know that your financial aid is secured. If we don't get the taxes, then we can let the business office know that we haven't gotten your taxes and we can't secure the financial aid. So just make sure you get your taxes in. So then to complete the application, you go right here to where it says to complete the form. Please click here, and it takes you over to the Wakefield specific financial aid application. And you just click start application and follow the directions. I'm not going to go through and set up an account and walk you through. I think it's
one per family.
one per family. Are there any questions about that? The form, I do the form every year just to refresh my memory, and the directions are pretty good. But if you have any questions as you're filling it out, just let me know. Yes?
Does any of the information stay in there from the last time it was filled out?
No. You start fresh. I think when you log in, it will have saved your biographical information, but you have to put all of your financial aid information in anew.
I'm Sue Lewis. I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees. I'd like to introduce Kevin Cole. He is on the board as well, and he joined us last year, I think, on the board. But don't want to compete with that.
Salt.
Exactly. Yeah, we need salt for the walkways. So Kevin is the chair of the admissions and marketing committee of the board, so he and I work together on things of this nature. I'd also like to do a shout out to General John Fairfield here, who is on the board as well. He's been, I think, on the board since '04, and I've been on the board since 2005. I think Kevin joined us last year. We sort of represent, each of us represents a little bit of a different family unit style. I had one son that went to Wakefield. He came here in the 6th grade and he graduated in 2009. John's granddaughter went to Wakefield basically since 1st grade, and she graduated last year and is at George Mason University. And Kevin has 3 children, one alum who's at GW. American, sorry, I knew it was at BC. So old, probably, sorry Rachel. But we're here today to talk to you a little bit about a new program, the Sibling Assistance Program. How many of you in the audience have more than one child, school-age child? Okay, great, excellent. So just to give you a little bit of a background, the board has really looked at how to make Wakefield as accessible as possible to frankly everybody. We value all of our families, small and large, young and older kids, so we're glad you're here, and we'd like for all of your children to be able to be here, and so we've been contemplating for a number of years how to really give access to people who have multiple children. We know that it's an inconvenience to have children at multiple schools. It's much easier to drive up that hill and drop off all of your children in one place and know that they're in good hands and getting a great education. So we've wrestled over the years with how to sort of be very fiscally responsible about how we provide access to Wakefield's education, but also to be responsive to those of you that have to come up with a multiple tuition situation to have your kids here. So we've really debated it. John probably knows better than Kevin because he came in last year, but we've debated it for a number of years. And just last year, we decided to stop deliberating and to get into action and to come up with a plan that we hope will be helpful to all of you. I'm sure it won't be perfect because most people have different needs and desires, but we hope it'll be meaningful and something that you'll take advantage of. So, as Sarah mentioned, and Ed mentioned in the onset, we've always had a financial aid budget of a little bit over $1 million, and that goes obviously to help people gain access to this education. This past year, we approved an additional separate pot of money, so it's not in any way changing the financial aid model that exists today, but we've approved a separate pot of money of about $100,000 to specifically deal with the idea of bringing additional siblings in a family to Wakefield. So that's new. It does go through the financial aid process because that we felt was a good way to really give it to the people that we felt really could help you get your children here and be comfortable in a good financial state to do that. So Kevin, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about some of the more mechanics of
A
it.
little bit to add, not much though, that covered a lot. We, as Sue said, we were really focused on this a lot over the last year. We held a focus group. It was a major topic of discussion during the board retreat and subsequent committee meetings and board meetings. This was discussed at length, and we tried to vet every pro and con we could think of, and ultimately we wanted to get to a point where we did something, but we wanted to do it in an appropriate way, and that's how we came up with the grant of $100,000. The point of it is to minimize non-enrolled siblings. We want you to bring the whole family here. We want to minimize non-enrolled siblings and get everybody in one place for your convenience and for the health of the school as well. And that's the major point of it, but I'm intimate with all the details because I've been in every committee meeting and what have you, so I'd love to answer any questions anybody has about how we got where we are, or anything else that you want to ask. Of course, if it's mechanical to the website, that's Sarah, but is there anything that I can tell you more besides the grant? And
You might mention, Kevin, the college report and the equitability with other schools in the area.
so the tipping point was we commissioned a report. We commissioned Mike Connor as a consultant to private schools, and we did an extensive report. I mean, 150 pages or something ridiculous like that. And the major point in there is that we need to consider something that we've talked about for many years, and that is to offer some financial aid for families with multiple children. And Mike Connor sort of pushed us over the edge and said, okay, now we're gonna do something. And the first thing that we did was discuss it as a board, and the next thing we did was hold a focus group. I'm not sure, I don't see anybody in here, I don't think anybody in here was in the focus group, I'm not sure. But then there was a board retreat, and the board retreat only talks about the major hot topics facing the school and what the solutions need to be, and this was one of them. There were 10 people in the room discussing just this one issue. And then there were subsequent committee meetings, and then ultimately a proposal was made by the committee to the board to add $100,000 to the pool of financial aid, but specifically and independent of, specifically for non-enrolled siblings and future siblings. And there was actually a test case done last year where we went out to families that were already here and said, you know, we can do something for you if you have a non-enrolled sibling, and a few families were able to take advantage of that. But what I want to emphasize is that this is separate and distinct from the other financial aid. This is strictly for helping people with multiple tuitions. So even if you don't qualify for the regular financial aid, you may still qualify for this, because it's, a lot of emphasis is put on the impact of multiple tuitions. So,
Is there a percentage, or how do you work out the?
So, more specifically, the $100,000 was approved, and the maximum grant will be 5% of total tuition paid. So if your total full tuition was $60,000, then the maximum award for this is $3,000.
How do the, I guess the evaluations of regular financial aid and the sibling financial or sibling grant affect each other? For instance, does getting regular financial aid affect how much you might be eligible for on the
If you
sibling or
qualify for
vice
regular
versa?
financial aid, you won't be considered for multiple siblings.
Okay.
We'll get you everything that we can get you in regular financial
Okay.
aid.
We would put you in the bucket where you did better.
The regular financial aid can be substantially more than 5%.
Right, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if they kind of
I
layered
think
it
the
or they were
average
separate
award in
programs.
regular financial aid is about 1/3 of total tuition.
Yeah, so that's an important sort of operational piece. There won't be something when you're filling out the financial aid application that says, do you want to be in the sibling program or the traditional need-based program? What I'll do is basically look at all of the applications as if they're traditional need-based applications. And if you didn't qualify under that program, but you had multiple tuitions, I'd kick you over for consideration in the sibling program.
I guess I'm confused. So you don't have to be a recipient of financial aid to get sibling aid.
No.
So if you know you're not going to be
I would
qualified
state,
for
I would
financial
state it the other way. If you are not a recipient of traditional financial aid, you can still be a recipient
Right,
of
okay.
multiple
So
tuition aid.
if I want to be considered, which I don't, want to be considered for sibling, you do a FAST application?
In either case,
You would do a FAST for.
It's still
sibling.
need-based, so it's not an across-the-board
Oh, so
discount.
it is need-based.
It's still need-based, it's just in the separate 100,000 that the board has approved, because of the way it will weight the impact of multiple tuitions, you may qualify for a grant there, whereas you wouldn't qualify for one out of the bigger pool of financial
if
aid.
you don't qualify for traditional financial aid,
I see.
then you're automatically, if you have multiple tuitions to pay, then you're automatically put in the second pool, and you're reassessed based on 2 or 3 or 4 tuitions, whatever you have.
But if I'm a millionaire and I have 3 students here.
You're still not gonna get anything.
Tuition for 3.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions, I mean, obviously, as we consider the different ways you could format this program, one of the questions that people said was, well, why not just make it automatic? Why don't I just check a box, say I have 3 kids, and off I go with my 5%? And, you know, we debated that for a long time, but obviously it doesn't cost us any less to educate a sibling than it costs us to educate another family who only has one child. So there's no sort of quantity, you know, discount in the process that we have with our students. So we wanted to obviously reflect that. So we thought, well, we don't want to necessarily, to your example, you know, give the millionaire who sends 3 kids here just sort of an automatic free ride on some of it, because that would frankly take away from the opportunity for other families to benefit from this program. So we decided to make it a need-based program. Because we feel as though that was the goal of the program to begin with, was to get more kids here and be able to afford the education. So as opposed to the check the box and you just automatically, you do go through the process that Sarah described, but we felt as though, you know, of all the formats, that was the fairest and really responded to the needs of those families. It's a burden to have to pay 3 tuitions if you want to send your family here.
Since the economy kind of imploded in 2008, things have been tighter and people have been more careful with how they spend their money. And so an example might be, you go to the orthodontist and say, I need prices for all 3 kids, and I'm bringing you 3 times your normal profit from a given family, and so I want to break. I want to give you, you know, something between 1 times profit or 3 times profit, whether it's 1.5 or whatever you negotiate with, but that's a profit. That's a business. We're a not-for-profit organization. We don't have any profit to give back. We operate as close to the best as we can. And the other thing is that places that offer substantial discounts have really automatic discounts, have really built that into their tuition structure. They put it in so they can take it back out. So we've just never done that. And so we don't really want to go there. That's why we've allocated a separate $100,000, which is really from fund a scholar type giving, for example, the auction and what have you.
Any other questions? I mean, we're standing up here, but obviously questions can be posed to any of us. And
Yeah, I'm accessible anytime you want. You can get in touch with me through Sarah. You can get my phone number or email address, and I'm happy to talk with anybody privately that wants to have a conversation.
Question? Kelly?
Is it just for bringing new students,
No,
No?
or it's for existing?
Absolutely.
that was our sort of trial balloon last year. That was, if you had an unenrolled sibling.
That was the confusion in it last year, because a lot of us have students here, but they're moving up. Like, I have one that's moved into middle school, so then my tuition went up with my sibling, and
Mhm.
yet I couldn't do that last year, so.
Right. No, this is
Yeah.
available to everybody that's currently here or that may desire to come. Or if you have kids here, but you don't have all the kids, it's obviously available.
So a lot of us have 2 or 3, but as they're getting older, we can't afford it now.
Yeah, the price goes
And
up more.
I'm government, so I'm never seeing a raise again.
At least so what the sequester looks like that's dead. So.
Yeah.
That's the joke at work, we're gonna retire without ever seeing a raise. It's true, it's sad.
Any other thoughts or questions? If you have feedback, as Kevin said, obviously this particular sibling program is really more board directed, so if you have concerns or feedback, we would welcome those, or through Ed. If you have specific questions, obviously Sarah's you're the person to work the process, make sure you get as much out of it as we can possibly give you, so.
Especially encourage feedback, you
Yeah.
know, 'cause it's our first time.
I just had one other question, is, for the sibling aid, is it capped at 100,000 for the program, or 5% per family? Like, if you get fewer applications, could the awards be greater than 5%, or is it just capped at that?
I think that it's 100,000 of available funds that have been set aside specifically for this, but the program cap would be 5%. So it's not gonna, if only 3 people apply, we're not gonna go to 10% or something like that. And we've looked at somebody asked a question about competition, I think John asked us to. We looked at a lot of the other schools in the area to try to be as competitive as we possibly can with other options people have in this region. And, many of the schools don't have anything, and some schools have more of a check the box, and we felt that this was competitive, and we ran some numbers with some of those other schools to make sure that we were giving as much as we possibly could to respond to this need. So we think we're pretty competitive with some of the other options.